Welcome to the second episode of vidcast about Italian theatre at the Russian courts and the activities of Italian actors in St. Petersburg. It was not until 1730, when a Kurland princess became Anna Ioannovna, Empress of Russia, reigning from 1731 to 1740, that the Russian Empire became an active participant in the pan-European performance network that already connected European courts and cities. The demand for foreign expertise capable of improving Russian political, military and court institutions, and the consequent importation of foreign artists, scientists, architects, sculptors to St. Petersburg began during the reign of Peter the Great. In his efforts to modernize Russia in the image of Western Europe, Peter I also wished to have musicians at his court. It was, however, only under the auspices of his game-changing niece Anna that theatre and opera performances acquired rather a regular rather than episodic character, and the first chapter of Russian theatre history was written. Energetically seeking to consolidate far-reaching Petrine reforms and Russia's position in the European political and diplomatic arena, the Tsarina was actively aware that the Italian theatre was a cultural medium that connected courts, centers of power and commerce from Naples to Madrid, London, Vienna and Copenhagen. The reign of Anna, often negatively contrasted with that of the reformist Peter, has generally been viewed as the saddest and darkest period in the Russian history. Her court, which she wished to transform into the most dazzling court in Europe and to some extent succeeded, was famous for its unsophisticated amusement. Yet, Anna's impact on the development of performing arts in Russia deserves a more sympathetic assessment. Indeed, her introduction of Italian theatre, opera and chamber music, as well as her founding of Russian ballet, point to the Tsarina's understanding of the arts' quintessentially social political significance. Anna's efforts to cultivate theatre were intimately connected to her initiative of expanding St. Petersburg court as a way of controlling the nobility and keeping its power in check. Far from being a lavish court entertainment, theatre served as a central meeting place for the ruling class and a particularly sensitive barometer of the Tsarina's authority. Beginning with Anna's reign, both opera and non-musical theatre were not only genres representative of Western Europe, they were also indispensable elements in the empress's statecraft and particularly powerful vehicle for a form of myth-building that was inextricably intertwined with her project of nation-building. At first, the Italian artists, who were such an invaluable component of Anna's court-building enterprise, were imported from the Saxon, Polish and German courts. The first Italian professional company was brought over from the operatic oasis of Dresden. August II, Elector of Saxony and King of Poland, lent Russian Tsarina his ensemble of experienced commedia dell'arte actors, singers and orchestral musicians, who arrived in Moscow from Warsaw in February 1731. After a month and a half of travels full of misadventures. The actors were headed by the actor and capocomico Tommaso Ristori, and the musicians by his son Giovanni Alberto Ristori, a young but already famous composer. In August 1731, Ristori's troupe was reinforced by a company of musicians recruited from Germany by Johann Hübner, violinist and concertmaster who had been in the service of the Empress for already 10 years. The repertoire of what is usually considered the first Italian company at the Russian court consisted of 23 improvised comedies, 7 comic interludes, and the first ever musical comedy performed in Russia, Calandro. Anna found the Italian actors to be indispensable for reaffirming her ambitions in local and international politics. She saw them as both a vehicle for representing statecraft and as a medium through which she could engage with the West. For this reason, the search for a new company, this time carried out directly in Italy, began after the departure of the first troupe at the end of 1731. The second company of actors, musicians, choreographers, dancers, and theatre architects was an extraordinary one. It included Antonio Sacco, who was to become a renowned Kuldonis actor, and Pietro Pertice, the most important buffo singer of the 18th century. Other members of the troupe were the actors Gaetano, Libera, Adriana, and Antonio Sacco, Giovanni Camillo Canzacchi, Ferdinando Colombo, Antonio Fioretti, Girolamo Ferrari, and Domenico Zanardi, the choreographer Giuseppe Sacco and Antonio Armano, the violinist Giovanni Piantanida, the singers Costanza Pusterli and Alessandra Stabili, the musicians Luigi and Antonio Madonis, and the scene designers Stefano Buffelli and Carlo Gibelli. Although neither the libretti nor the scores of the plays performed by the first Italian company in Russia have survived, the activity and the repertoire of the second troupe are documented by 2 main sources of information. The first is the administrative account compiled in the years 1744 and 1745 by Giuseppe Avoglio, actor and librettist who was appointed as the second company's accountant. Avoglio's account lists expenditures for costumes, scenery, and stage props, and identify some of the names of the members of the troupe and the dates of the performances. The second source of information is a collection of 44 surviving Commedia dell'arte scenarios and comic interludes performed at Anna's court between 1733 and 1735. By the second and then by the third Italian companies in residence. 30 improvised comedy scenarios, 8 interludes, and 1 tragicomedy were discovered by Vladimir Sipovsky and were published by Vladimir Perets in 1917. This publication was later expanded by Robert Alois Moser and Maria Luisa Ferrazzi discovery of 5 additional comedies and interludes. Both Avoglio's account and the collection of scenarios and libretti are known to scholars. These sources have been used to reconstruct the membership of the troupe and have been read as an evidence of the impact of foreign repertoire on the local dramatic tradition. Here, I propose to approach them from a different angle, namely, to discover what the activities and the repertoire of the second Italian company in St. Petersburg can tell us about the inner workings of professional theatre world and about the system of production and reception outside Italy in the early decades of the 18th century. In particular, I will provide new insights into, first, complex communication channels used by patrons, agents, and actors, as well as events related to the recruitment of personnel. Second, the choice of repertoire and its dissemination across Europe. Third, the careers and migration paths of the artists, Those willingness to undertake an arduous journey across multiple borders aided Russia to a larger theatrical circuit for traveling troops. And fourth, the level of aesthetic sophistication of the local spectators and the way they received Italian theater. As it was already mentioned, the search for the second company began at the end of 1731, when the Empress dispatched the violinist Johann Kaiser on a mission to Italy to find new performers. After receiving a significant sum for his travel expenses and for the recruitment of personnel, the agent disappeared, and his further whereabouts are unknown. The Empress's two other headhunters, Johann Hübner, a Viennese-trained Prussian conductor who had previously acted as an agent for the troupe hired in Germany, and the musician Domenico Maria Dreyer, were more successful in their mission. Their search for personnel continued until September 1732, but it was not until the summer of 1733 that the Italian actors, who would remain at the Russian court for nearly 2 years, arrived in St. Petersburg from Venice. Almost nothing is known about the behind-the-scenes operations that made the operisti and comici italiani's performances possible. However, Avoliu's account allows a reconstruction of the makeup of the troupe and the network of locations and relationship between agents, singers, musicians enable us to establish the communication channels through which the members of the ensemble were recruited. If we use 6 degrees of separation to connect artists with each other, we cannot help but notice that to build a new company, the Empress's headhunters used their personal and professional connections. Indeed, it appears likely that in the choice of Domenico Dreyer as Anna's agent was not accidental. The oboist was brother to Giovanni Filippo Dreyer, nicknamed as Tedeschino, the little research alto castrato singer, and the composer of intermezzi and oratori, who would later act as the impresario of the third Italian company. Along with his brother, Giovanni entered service in Russia in 1731 as a member of the ensemble engaged by Hübner in Germany. Although the singer could not leave the already depleted ensemble after Ristori's departure, and in fact he continued to sing in the chamber music concerts with Marina Cristina Avoglio and her sister, he must have been given his brother a wish list of singers and musicians he had previously collaborated with. His stage career dates back to 1721, and after performances in Rome, Viterbo, Lucca, Dreyer was employed at Venice Teatro San Cassiano. It must have been his idea to recruit Pietro Pertici, because both Dreyer and Pertici were Florentine. Given that they performed together in the opera Lucio Papirio and Rodelinda at the Teatro of Lucca during the Carnival season of 1724, it is possible that the engagement of Pertici was suggested by Dreyer. In fact, as Gianni Cicali rightly argues, a cast is also formed according to professional, role-related elective affinities based on prior experience and encounters between the performers. The recruitment of the Florentine soprano Alessandra Stabili seems to follow the same pattern. Little is known about her background, but in the years 1731 and 32, Stabili was active in Tuscany and specialized in scene buffe. In 1731, Stabili and Pertici would have crossed paths at the Teatro del Coccomero in Florence, where they performed together in La Commedia in Commedia, one of the most successful comic operas of the first half of the 18th century, and also in La Vanità delusa by the same authors. Considering that the comic actors usually formed small but stable touring ensembles, it is likely that Pertici and Stabili aimed to create a partnership modeled on the renowned pairs of comic intermezzo specialists such as Gioacchino Corrado and Celeste Reste, and Antonio Ristorini and Rosa Ungarelli. All indications are that the Commedia dell'arte part of the troupe, with the Sacco family at its center, the capocomico Gaetano Sacco, his wife Libera, his son Antonio, with his wife Antonio Franchi Sacco, and his daughters Adriana and Anna Caterina, were also recruited in Florence. The first traces of Truffaldino specialist Antonio Sacco's experience come from the Teatro della Pergola, where he played the role of the second Zanni in the intermezzi staged during the carnival seasons of 1730, while his father's company was active at the Teatro del Coccomero. It is highly probable that upon accepting the employment at the Russian court, the actors tried to get supplementary appointments for their relatives, and that the engagement of another member of the Sacco family, the choreographer Giuseppe Sacco, was suggested by his kinsman. We are once again led back to Florence by the biographies of the two other performers, the violinist and composer Giovanni Piantanida and his wife, the famous soprano singer Costanza Pusterli Piantanida. Those presence in Florence is documented between 1731 and 32. The rest of the company was hired in Venice, where Giovanni Dreyer was active during the 1725 and 26 seasons and had numerous contacts and acquaintances. Among the personnel recruited there were the Venetian musicians and half-brothers Luigi and Antonio Madonis, and the Bolognese actors Giovanni Camillo Canzacchi, who is known to have returned to Venice from Vienna exactly at that time. The characteristic feature of the recruitment model adopted by Russian court headhunters is thus its heavy reliance of both family networks and their interconnected networks of personal and professional relationship. However uncertain the information about the engagement of the artists, several clues are instructive in tracing their career paths. First, the artistic resume of most of the actors, singers and musicians were so comprehensive by the time they reached Russia that they could no longer be considered entirely Venetian, Florentine or Italian, but cosmopolitan. In fact, at the time of the engagement for the Russian court, most of the performers had already acquired extensive experience working abroad. Due to the deep and long-lasting economic crisis that began in 1717 and didn't end before 1739, Venice became an excellent place for young actors and singers to gain experience, but it provided no support for a long-term career. La Serenissimi's multiplicity of theaters formed an enormous network of performers that were recruited for Milanese, Parisian and English stages, among other places. The careers of most of the artists in the second company offer an eloquent example of how Venetian Lagoon was the launching pad for traveling performance and opera troupes.
Sì, ecco, all'interno naturalmente della tradizione italiana non era la stessa cosa nascere o crescere in una o in un'altra città d'Italia. Ecco, naturalmente adesso chiunque pensa all'Italia come un paese unito, una nazione da dopo l'unità d'Italia, che è qualcosa di comunque relativamente recente. L'Italia del periodo di cui parliamo è un'Italia formata da numerosi stati più o meno grandi o più o meno piccoli. Alcuni di questi stati, due in particolare, sono luoghi e le città, le capitali di questi stati erano anche capitali della storia teatrale. Ecco, indubbiamente le due città italiane più importanti, senza togliere nulla naturalmente alla vita polimorfa e varia dell'Italia, sono Venezia e Napoli. Ecco, Venezia e Napoli sono capitali teatrali, anche se rette da forme stato completamente diverse, per il fatto che il teatro era una attività promossa, non solo permessa ma promossa. In particolare Venezia è un luogo dove i mercanti veneziani, persi i grandi traffici del mare dei secoli precedenti, si sono riconvertiti come latifondisti, sono dedicati all'agricoltura, naturalmente al controllo dell'agricoltura del latifondo, e dall'altra hanno inventato il mestiere dell'impresariato teatrale. Quindi Venezia era una città piena di teatri e quindi pensando ai grandi protagonisti della storia veneziana, musicisti, commediografi, attori, cantanti, eccetera, che permetteva di vivere di teatro e poi di andare anche a farlo in altri luoghi. Ecco, Venezia, i teatri di Venezia poi erano molti e collocati in maniera differente rispetto alla pianta cittadina. Quelli più importanti di opera e di commedia stavano al centro della città e quelli meno importanti, che vanno dal teatro succedaneo ai luoghi della prostituzione o di altro, a teatri più periferici, più piccoli e quindi più portati alla sperimentazione, si collocavano nel resto della città. Ecco, dico sempre, per esempio parlando di Carlo Goldoni, che un uomo dell'ingegno, del talento di Carlo Goldoni, se non fosse nato a Venezia, come è successo ad altri, avrebbe combinato pochissimo in altre città d'Italia. E quindi Venezia, Napoli e Parigi, come abbiamo detto prima, o altre città europee, sono state città italiane, capitali dello spettacolo, che hanno permesso a uomini e donne di vivere, di spostarsi, di scrivere, di recitare, di cantare, e diventando troppo piene, come si dice, erano anche luoghi di partenza e di ritorno, come poi accade verso altri fronti e di propagazione di questo ambito culturale. Anche i viaggi dei comici italiani, non perché uno debba necessariamente nascere qui, naturalmente parliamo di costruzioni di troupe, di compagnie e quant'altro, ecco, tuttavia anche la diffusione europea del teatro italiano trova in Venezia e Napoli punti di partenza e di irradiazione. Da Venezia si parte verso l'Europa del Nord e da Napoli si parte per altre rotte. Per andare in Spagna o in Portogallo era più comodo andare per via d'acqua, partendo da Napoli, e per andare a Vienna, a Monaco, a Dresda, fino a San Pietroburgo o a Londra, dall'altra parte, evidentemente partendo dalle città del nord.
Giovanni Antonio Guerra, the Venetian bass singer and composer, had been resident in Prague since the founding of the Spork Theatre in 1724, staying there until 1726. Giovanni Dreyer arrived in St. Petersburg after his engagement in Breslau and in Prague at the Spork Theatre during the carnival and spring seasons of 1726 and 28. The violinist Luigi Madonis, who joined in 1725 a traveling company on a tour, was active in Breslau in 1726 and in Paris in 1731. The violinist Pietro Mira and the actor Giovanni Porazzisi, who actually arrived in St. Petersburg in April 1732 before the second company, and Francesco Ermano, the actor who was a member of the first company and returned to Russia again, had thus already traversed the courts of Europe before finding employment in Russia. Whereas multifaceted international experience was also the norm rather than the exception for performance employed at other European courts and operatic centers, the second clue relates to a peculiarity of the Russian court. The Empress's agents adopted a recruitment model typical of opera seria, in which opera stars were hired individually for one season and then each went their own way in search of their next contract and suitable engagement. That the assembled company was not a stable one like Mingotti's troupe with singers who were already used to working together, but artists with different skills had important consequences for the opera production practice in Russia. The intersection of the careers of performers from different backgrounds created opportunities for developing professional acting skills through close observation of fellow artists, dancers, and singers. It is thus interesting to investigate what kind of repertoire they imported to the Russian capital.